Hello, my dear friend. Welcome back to the Reflective Parenting Podcast. My name is Cindy Hovington and I'm your host. I am a mom of three from Montreal, Canada, and I have a Ph.D. in neuroscience. The podcast that you're listening to right now is really for parents who want to understand the science of emotions and discipline and behavior, build stronger connections with their children, and learn how to take care of themselves along the way. That is my goal with everything that I do. Not only am I the host of this podcast, but I'm the founder and CEO of Curious Neuron. And Curious Neuron is here to support parents. It is not a parenting resource. It is a platform, a digital platform for parents so that you finally feel supported. You have enough out there telling you what to do and how to parent, but I want to be there for you. I want you to feel like you're not alone. And more importantly, I want to help parents build the confidence that they need because so many parents I speak to doubt what they're doing, worry that they're not doing enough, worry that what they are struggling with, regulating their emotions or managing stress and anxieties of everyday life, they worry that they are passing that on to their kids. And so if you are a parent that can relate to this, then this podcast is for you. Today's episode is one that I believe every parent needs to hear. We're going to be diving into the science of punishment versus discipline and how each one shapes your child's brain differently. So if you're a parent who feels that you often resort to threats or punishment more than discipline, which we will break down in this episode, then I want you to really take the time. I'm going to be making this episode really short so that you have the time to listen and process this. And if at the end of this episode you feel that this is something you need to dig into a little bit more, Tuesday, September 3rd, 23rd, that is tomorrow, we are going to be diving deeper into this inside the Reflective Parent Club. That is a space that I've created to give us the time to pause as parents because we're so stuck in this hyper education mode as parents, trying to soak everything in and make sure that we learn everything. But as a mom said a couple weeks ago inside the club, she now has taken the time to pause and actually apply what she's learning and see how it works inside her home. Because even if I give you advice, the way you tweak it inside your home is going to look differently than somebody else tweaking it into their home. And so that is what the Reflective Parent Club is all about. Today you're going to hear what the research actually shows about spanking and yelling, harsh discipline, and why connection-based discipline helps your child develop the skills they need for a lifetime of emotional health. It truly shapes how our child will regulate their own emotions later on when we show up in a certain way when we are disciplining them. And I don't want this to be misunderstood as allowing them to do what they want and us being their best friends. No, there are still limits and boundaries. In fact, limits and boundaries are so important for your child's development. So here's one thing I ask of you. If you know a parent who's been struggling, feeling guilty that they are often yelling at their kids and feeling like they're punishing them and feeling like they're always giving consequences or having to threaten them to get them to do what they want, then take a moment to send this episode to that friend. I am trying to grow this community, this podcast community, for many reasons. I believe that more parents need to feel supported, that more parents need to stop doubting what they are doing and feel confident as they move along their parenting journey and stop looking for scripts. But more importantly, we are going to grow this community and spread this feeling that we have when we listen to this podcast. And I truly want to grow this podcast community more. And so if you know a parenting group, share this episode in that group. If you are part of the parent committee at your child's school, share this episode in that community, in the WhatsApp, in the Facebook group. Please help us join or spread this podcast and bring more parents into this reflective parenting movement that I am trying to create. I recently read the book Connections Over Compliance by Dr. Lori Desautels. She will be coming onto this podcast soon, and I'm really excited to speak to her. But more importantly, I felt that I couldn't wait to talk to you about this book. If you are a parent, a teacher, an early childhood educator, I highly recommend you read this book or that this book becomes part of the book club if you have one within your school or early childhood center because it's just that important. She has this term that she uses called relational discipline. And this is what sort of sparked the entire idea of this podcast episode because I often hear parents, even inside the club, where we say, or they say to me, that they are stuck sometimes in a moment when their child is disobedient, doesn't follow, doesn't listen, ignores them. They are stuck in some of their old patterns because they were raised in a way where you don't listen, there's a consequence. There's a consequence where you will fear the adult that you are with enough that you won't do that again. This fear based discipline, we now know through research, shapes the brain a little bit differently when it comes to how you will perceive the world. And I'm going to share all of that research with you. And it's in the show notes as well if you want to read the full studies. But we have to remember as parents that in those moments that we so deeply want to stop the behavior, it's not about stopping the behavior, but it's about supporting your child in learning how to shift it. And so this book reminds us about all the work, and it's not just the trauma-informed work that I had interviewed Dr. Bruce Perry about. I'll put that in the show notes as well. But it's truly about understanding that these moments of threat, yell, fear, consequence, punishment, corporal punishment, spanking, hitting, these moments will shape the child's brain in a way that emotions will be a little bit more difficult for them to manage later on. And not just emotions, fear and stress. And so we have to, as a society, come back to the patterns that we are stuck in and work on those together, which is what I want to help you with. First, think about how a child's brain and ours perceives the world. Even in a moment of discipline, our brain just wants to make sure that we are safe. Our brain and your child's brain is constantly saying, who can I trust? And are you with me? Because innately, we want connection. That is at the core of everything, which is why I love that Dr. Laurie Desautels has referred to this as relational discipline. Because when we use that term, we remember that even in the moments when we are so upset with our child, so frustrated, so disappointed if they did something, and I'm thinking about those teenage years, even through all of those moments, connection still exists. It must, because even when a child is quote unquote being disciplined, at the core of that is connection. They should still feel connected to us. They should still feel the love. And if you've been part of this podcast for a while, you know that many years ago, I told my young kids, in a moment when I'm getting really mad and frustrated, if ever you don't feel loved because of the words that I use, because of the gestures or the things that I say or how I say them, if ever you don't feel loved in that moment, can you please tell me right away? Because it will never be my intention. But sometimes emotions take over our brain and we say things, or we say it in a certain way that doesn't make the other person feel loved. And I don't ever want to do that. And if I do that, I want to make sure I correct it right away. That was my one instruction to my children, my 3 kids. And it remains to this day that I remind them of this. And they've never had to tell me that they don't feel love in those moments. This applies in relationships. Do we still feel loved in that moment? You should feel loved in all of those interactions. And they should feel loved in those interactions, even in deep anger. And so I think that as a society, we should be thinking about what that looks like in our home. Are we showing this to our kids? And are they feeling this lack of love in those moments or connection? So let's start this whole conversation with thinking about what discipline looks like in our homes. Are we falling back on threats, yelling, and fear-based discipline? There might be an instinct that is embedded in you. You don't have to think back to how you were parented specifically, but take a moment to think about the patterns that were built in you. When your child isn't following an instruction, is that feeling like you're the authority and being disrespected? Does it feel like you have a lack of control when your 4 or 5-year-old is not following or isn't being compliant, right? That might feel hard for some of us, especially when we are around family and if they embed it in us that we have to make sure that our kids follow, and that if they're not following every single thing that we said, or not sitting down properly at the dinner table for 3 hours, that we are not a good parent. Maybe there's some aspect of this that needs to be reflected on, journaled about, or spoken about with your partner or with your parents. That is not a sign of bad parenting. It's a sign of a child struggling. And so, how do we show up for that child? We are their leader. But how do we show up for that child in a way that they know that we are a leader that cares? And we are also going to show them right from wrong. And we are also going to show them how to regulate emotions enough that they can hear us and follow us and listen to what needs to be done right now if we are asking them to do something. Because if their brain is dysregulated and they have too much energy, or maybe their brain is dysregulated and they have a really big emotion, and so they're not really hearing what we're asking of them. If we are a reflective parent, as we are doing here as a community, then we can sense and feel and see that our child is dysregulated. And so it's not time for punishment or discipline. It's a time for me to show up as my child leader and help them regulate by co-regulating. And the way that you co-regulate is you regulate yourself first. Them not listening or not following is not going to lead to you feeling angry. It's going to lead to you seeing that child for what it is, a child that needs you right now. They don't need punishment, consequence, and threats. They need you to see that they are struggling to regulate, and they will struggle to regulate for a very long time. I had a parent who hadn't realized that a 7-year-old shouldn't or should still be struggling with regulating their emotions. We don't have to look far. Many of us as adults still struggle to regulate our emotions. And sometimes that struggle in regulating, and in addition, those internal feelings of wanting to feel like you are in control, wanting to feel that you are that authoritative figure that will never be disrespected. That's an unrealistic expectation. But if you want that feeling, or if that's the feeling you have inside, that mixed in with not knowing how to regulate your emotions leads to hitting our kids, being rough with them, because we've lost control, not them, we. And now what we know from research is that that leads to many struggles. So here are some studies that I found. I was really interested in seeing what is out there. What are some recent studies? So there was a study by Kuratas and al. In 2021. Basically, what they found is that punishment wires the brain for fear. So children who were spanked showed 23% stronger neural responses. So there's a higher activation in the brain to threat in areas of the brain like the prefrontal cortex. And this is similar to what happens in the brain of a child who's exposed to severe maltreatment. So it's not that one is less than the other. So you might say, I'm not using corporal punishment. I'm not, putting my child in a closet and locking them there. That's severe maltreatment and punishment. I'm not using objects to hit my child. I'm just spanking them in moments when they are disobedient and not compliant. Well, now we know through research that their brain will form in the same way or similar ways as a child who was exposed to severe maltreatment. So what they found is that this overactivation is in the parts of the brain for danger, for fear, which means that by spanking our kids, they become more vigilant in their environment for danger. If you are more vigilant in your environment for danger, then your brain is more often than not in fight or flight because you are looking around making sure that you are safe, not consciously, subconsciously. And what we know now is that a child who is raised in this environment, when they are sitting in the classroom, if your brain is vigilant for danger, it is not as open to learning. How can you learn? How can you be 100% focused and curious and excited and calm enough to learn if your brain is expecting danger? And so a loud noise in the classroom is that danger you've been waiting for the past hour sitting in the classroom. That child saying something rude or one child in the classroom yelling is a confirmation to your brain that something bad is about to happen. That one teacher who might be a little bit more strict, who yells or who has maybe some features, nonverbal features, the way that their faces or their eyebrows or their mouth, those nonverbal features are confirmation that you are not safe for that child who's constantly scanning the environment for danger because of how their brain was shaped in their early environment in their own home. And so it truly is a reminder of how it shapes the brain and sets it up to kind of look for danger constantly. There was another article that showed that harsh parenting impacts the connectivity to the amygdala, the fear center of the brain, the emotion center of the brain. It accelerates the brain development area of this part of the brain. And that acceleration is not a good thing. It's not making it more adult like and more in control. The acceleration of that part of the brain, again, primes it to not know how to regulate certain emotions. It didn't take on enough experiences to build that resiliency in that part of the brain because of how quickly it developed. It's almost like the brain put it in SOS mode and said, you need to develop quickly to protect yourself. But it didn't give it enough experiences. And so those children will struggle to regulate emotions later on and struggle with stress. There's one more study I wanted to share with you that I found really interesting. So the ones that talk about fear and constantly scanning the environment to make sure that they are safe, those have been out before. And I think I've spoken about them on the podcast, but there's one that I thought was really interesting. And this is a new study from 2023. And what they found is that punishment, whether it's threats, yelling, constant yelling. So this is not just your one time of the week, but this is like a child living in an environment where they fear the caregivers that are there, increases our anxieties about mistakes. So children that were exposed to punishment and corporal punishment had greater brain reactivity to error and blunted response to rewards. So that's the science way of saying it. But what this means is that they grow up more anxious about making mistakes and less motivated by positive reinforcement. So reward doesn't work the same way in their brain. If you want this in even more simple terms, that kind of early environment shows up in some kids. This is not a direct relationship. And if you want to use that to justify punishment in the home, I don't encourage that. I want to be true to the science. It is not a direct link. So if you are somebody that experienced corporal punishment or your partner, and they are great at regulating emotions, they have not continued this cycle. They are good at managing stress and great at building relationships and connections, then that's because not everyone who goes through this will end up in the way that I'm speaking to you about. However, there are correlations, which means that it's reminding us to be careful of what we do in our environment. And so this study, again, in simple terms, found that if we are growing up more anxious about making mistakes, it means that this could show up as perfectionism. This could show up as people pleasing. And this could show up as constant self-criticism. And if rewards, everyday simple rewards, a glass of water after a run is a reward, a hug from somebody you care for about is a reward. These activate the brain in a way that it feels good, and your brain seeks more of these moments. But if these natural moments are not leading to your brain feeling what it needs to, and that's in the ventral tegmental area, the VTA, if these natural moments are not feeling how they should feel, then what that leads to is your brain seeking that feeling, because we need those feelings. We need those feelings of reward, and we need those dopamine hits, and we need those hormone and neurotransmitters that make us feel good We need those. We want those. We crave those. And so if we're not getting those by speaking with a friend that says, it's okay, look, you had a hard day today. You yelled at your kids. You will be fine tomorrow. Let's talk about it. And tomorrow everything will be fine. And when you hang up with that friend, you take that sigh of relief and you say, okay, I feel good. I'm going to go talk to my kids and apologize to them. That's a feeling of reward. And when we don't have natural ways, then we look for unnatural ways. That sip of red wine or white wine or whatever it is that you enjoy, when we sip it, we get that feeling of reward. And if we haven't felt it in other ways that are natural, we are going to seek that feeling as often as possible. If we do other things, right? Gambling, anything that can lead to an addiction. And there are so many addictions: food, drinking, drugs, porn, gambling, shopping. All of these are ways that we get a hit, that dopamine hit that feels so good. And it's more than just that. And when we get that, we will want more because of how good it feels. If our child or you were raised in an environment where you didn't feel connected and safe and seen, then that leads to a struggle in feeling good or feeling as good as we should in those natural ways of having rewards. And so we seek it out. This is a serious study. It's serious implications for a child's future well-being and mental health. And so if you have a home environment that is more towards punishment, here's what I'd like for you to think about. I know that I kind of shared all the more serious stuff right now, but it's not too late. It's not too late to shift from punishment to connection. So here's what Dr. Lori Desautels talks about in her book, Connections Over Compliance. More than anything, the first step is regulating yourself. And if that, and it is for most parents, especially the parents that are coming into the Reflective Parent Club, that is the hard part. If we never learned how to regulate ourselves, if we never learned how to cope with emotions, then that is hard. And that means we don't co-regulate with our child. And that means that they often don't feel safe because we don't know how to make ourselves feel safe. And so learn, take the next step, stop reading books in a few days. So by the week of October 1st, in those days coming, the course that we have inside the Reflective Parent Club will become separate from our weekly calls. I've heard from all of you now. I understand. I meet with parents, and the link to my Calendly is in the show notes. You can meet with me. I actually have 1 out of the 5 spots left for private consultations that will be starting the first week of October. There are many ways for you to learn how to cope with your emotions and make your child feel safe and learn how to connect with them. Everything was kind of bunched together, but now there will be 3 ways. You will be able to take a course, a self-paced course that will guide you through all the 4 domains of emotional intelligence, give you some videos and audios and reflection prompts and PDFs and workbooks that you can work on at your pace. But I encourage you, reading and learning about and listening to these podcasts is not enough. I encourage you to take the next step. So by October 1st, that course will be available on its own at a certain price, and the weekly calls will be available on its own if you want to chat with me every week and with other parents and feel supported. And as always, every quarter, I take on 5 families to chat with me and to have me available on your WhatsApp by text so that we can work together on helping you learn how to regulate your emotions. But here's the thing. If you want the course and the weekly calls, it's your last chance to get it at $1 a day until October 1st. The prices will be going up for both. And so if you want access to both, it's time to take that leap. Try it out for free a full week. That link is in the show notes. So here, according to Lori Desautels, that first step is regulating yourself. Step 2 is creating safety for your child. Step 3 is connecting before correcting. Correcting is still there. Setting the limit and the boundaries is still there, but you're doing it in a way where your child feels safe. And especially in those early years, it is not the same as situations that are more intense. Your child is not following, yes, but there's no need for fear. There truly is no need for fear. And the more you learn how to take these 3 steps, the more your child will follow. We need to resist this feeling soft. Connection is not being permissive. It's what actually helps the brain develop. But some of us, through the way that we were parented, this sort of concept of that as being soft is going to be stuck on our minds. And so I truly encourage you to reflect on that, or to work on what that internal dialogue is going to look like for you, to move past that feeling of being soft with my child. You're still setting the limits and boundaries. You're just doing it in a way that their brain is going to develop, in a way that they will be able to manage emotions and stress later on. This might not be an easy task for you. And this might look like it has to be a goal you set yourself, or a challenge that you set yourself. It's okay to take baby steps, making small shifts every day. So if your natural instinct to your child not following is to react, to yell, to grab their arm, to threaten them, take small steps. Write it down. What will be those small steps? Can you say it at a lower voice next time? Can you pause before you react and just have a phrase or a sentence on your mind? Maybe it's the 3 steps I just read. Maybe it's going to be regulate, create safety, and connect before correcting. Maybe that's the one simple phrase you say. I'll say it again. So if I'm in the moment where I just want to yell at my kids, or I just want to grab their arm, I'm going to say, Cindy, regulate first. Make sure they feel safe, and connect before you correct. Right? There has to be a way that you show up for yourself in that moment. And if it always feels so hard to pause, then there is more to it. Maybe you're going through a lot right now. Maybe you're going through a separation or divorce, or you have a parent that is ill. Maybe your marriage is struggling and you are struggling to show up for yourself. Maybe work is causing you to feel so much stress. I work with so many parents that have jobs that are really important jobs. But then this whole idea of separating work and family life, it's not true. You can't. It's hard. And so work comes into your home, and then you react to your child, and then you feel like shit because you say to yourself, I did it again, and you feel guilty, and you go to bed wondering if this is damaging your child. If that's happening a lot, then there's more work to be done, but it's not impossible. And so maybe you want to repair now, and you never did that before. And so you show up with your child, and you at bedtime talk to them and say, you know what? I've only recently realized how often I yell, and I'm so sorry. I'm starting to work on that, but I'm going to need you to understand that it's going to come out in some ways that I don't want. And I'll make sure that I come back to you to remind you that I love you and apologize. And I hope you start seeing differences. Have this conversation with your child. That is where the connection happens, in the repair. If you are a parent that feels a lot of stress, I encourage you to click the link in the show notes. Next week, I will be giving a free webinar to talk about stress management for parents, and also to show you some concepts from science that shows us how stress trickles down into our child's life and classroom if they go to school. And if you are a parent inside the Reflective Parent Club, the event will be posted inside the Reflective Parent Club. It will be through Zoom, and anybody can attend. There will not be a replay. The replay will only be inside the Reflective Parent Club. I hope that this episode kind of reminded you of the importance of connection during discipline. It's still there. Discipline is just teaching our kids what's right from wrong. Discipline is teaching, it's education, and it can be done in a way where a child feels safe. I needed to talk about this today because I've heard parents that are still struggling to not punish their children. And whether it's you or your partner, sit down and listen to this episode together. Read the blog post that I'm going to put in the show notes. Send it to them. Listen to this episode. Talk about it together. Reflect about it together using the reflection prompts that I put in the blog post, and find ways to make small changes. I hope you enjoyed this episode. Please share it. And I will see you next Monday. And we will have a special guest, and it will be a good one. Have a wonderful week. Bye.